At 33, I never imagined that the house I worked so hard to provide for would feel like a cage. When Brielle and I first moved in, it was supposed to be the beginning of something sacred, our life together. A space that echoed with possibility, laughter, plans whispered over late-night coffee. But now, those walls vibrated with noise that wasn't mine. Brielle's three sisters had become permanent residents in what was once our quiet sanctuary. Simone moved in first after a rough breakup. Then Harper, after corporate burnout, pushed her to resign. Noelle was last, said her lease was up, and she needed a pause. A few weeks, they promised. That was 11 months ago. I tried to be understanding. I've been raised to take care of those you love, to offer your home as a shelter, especially when people were down on their luck. But this wasn't a season. This was an invasion. I found myself tiptoeing around the house like a guest. Couldn't leave my tools in the hallway without Harper complaining they ruined the aesthetic. Couldn't even watch a game in the living room without Simone reminding me she was using the space for meditative journaling. Noelle was constantly sprawled across the couch in silk robes like some Instagram influencer waiting for lighting to hit her just right. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I paid the bills quietly. Mortgage, utilities, Wi-Fi. Even bought a bigger fridge because we needed more space. Every trip to the store turned into a shopping spree. Almond butters, imported teas, vegan cheese that nobody finished. Brielle always justified it. They're healing. They need time. What about me? What about the hours I clocked at work, the skipped lunches, the overtime, so we wouldn't fall behind? But if I brought it up, suddenly I was the villain. I remember sitting at the dining table one night, bills spread in front of me like an autopsy report. Numbers didn't lie. Our expenses had tripled since the girls moved in, and my salary hadn't grown wings. My hands trembled as I held the calculator, trying to make sense of how I was thousands in the red despite working 6 days a week. I'd become a wallet with feet. I brought it up to Brielle that evening. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply said, we need to talk about the expenses. This isn't sustainable. She barely looked up from her phone, just murmured, you're the provider, babe. You said that when we got married. I had. I said it in vows, in warmth, in belief that our effort would be mutual, that we would build something side by side. I didn't say it so she could weaponize it as a lifetime subscription to my bank account. I tried again. I can't keep this up, Brielle. Maybe they can chip in a little, even $50 a month. Groceries, gas, something. She frowned like I'd asked her to evict orphans. They're family. This is their home, too. You need to learn humility. We're all in this together. Humility. The word echoed like a slap, as if supporting 5 adults on one income was arrogance, as if not wanting to drown in debt made me ungrateful. I sat back, stunned. It wasn't just the money. It was the disrespect, the complete dismissal of my needs, the silent expectation that I would just keep giving until I broke. The sisters began to echo Brielle's sentiment. Harper once asked, isn't that what being a man is, while sipping some lavender latte she didn't pay for. Simone added, you've got a roof, a car, a job. Why complain? Noelle, who hadn't worked a day since she arrived, told me I needed to trust the universe. The universe wasn't the one paying our water bill, I was. Every time I opened my mouth, I became the bad guy. I stopped bringing up finances. Stopped mentioning the broken heater or the car repairs I'd postponed. I just endured. Came home late. Left early. Hid in my own bedroom while the house buzzed with shopping hauls, scented candles, and empty coffee cups left on every flat surface. One evening, I got home to find a note on the fridge. We need to have a family meeting. That word again, family. I showed up, expecting maybe a discussion, a shared concern. Instead, I got a lecture. Brielle sat at the head of the table, flanked by her sisters like a tribunal. We feel like your energy has been off, she said. We think you need to reassess your attitude. They used words like emotional tax, masculine toxicity, and protecting our peace. I sat there numb, staring at the women I'd housed, fed, and sacrificed for, listening to how I wasn't doing enough. They didn't mention the money, didn't mention the labor, just my lack of spiritual generosity, as they called it. I slept poorly that night, tossed, and turned while laughter rang from the living room. Someone had ordered sushi. I hadn't eaten dinner. In the morning, I stared at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man looking back. Eyes tired, shoulders heavy, jaw clenched like it didn't know how to relax anymore. I didn't know then how close I was to being removed from my own life. That the very people I sacrificed for were plotting a lesson in humility I'd never forget. But something inside me had already shifted. I just didn't have the language for it yet. All I knew was this: I was the only man in the house. And somehow, I felt completely alone. Back when it was just Brielle and me, things were different. We were partners. She worked full-time at a nonprofit, I managed logistics for a supply chain company, and we split everything: rent, groceries, date nights, right down to the last cent. We laughed about being broke but happy, finding joy in burnt toast and borrowed Wi-Fi. She used to press her head against my shoulder after long shifts and whisper, "As long as we've got each other, we've got enough." I believed her. Maybe she believed it too once. But everything changed when her sisters moved in. The first week, it felt temporary. We squeezed around our tiny dining table, shared bathroom schedules, and I even made jokes about the feminine energy vortex I was trapped in. But weeks turned into months, and I stopped laughing. It was like watching a slow leak drain the soul out of our home. Harper, the fashion-forward middle sister, treated the living room like a runway. Designer deliveries arrived twice a week, boxy cardboard stamped with logos I'd never heard of. Bags, shoes, jackets I'd never see her wear again. I asked Brielle once, "Is she paying for any of this?" She shrugged. "Harper's figuring things out. Don't stress." Figuring things out while doing photo shoots on my balcony, tagging brands in stories like she was an influencer? Meanwhile, I was behind on the electricity bill because I chose to cover everyone's groceries again. Simone was a different flavor of frustration. She was deep into her self-care era, as she called it. Daily salon appointments, long baths that monopolized the hot water, and boxes of skincare products cluttering every bathroom shelf. Once, I came home to find her face slathered in some gold-looking mask, lounging in my robe with a glass of wine I'd bought. "You don't mind, do you?" she said with a smile that already assumed I didn't have a choice. She spoke like her presence was a blessing, like her being in the house elevated the vibration or some crap. I stepped over her crystals in the hallway every morning, wondering how many of them it would take to bring me peace. Then there was Noelle. The baby of the bunch, fresh from a breakup and apparently allergic to employment. She spent her days sprawled on the couch, scrolling TikTok and ordering food 3 times a day like she was the queen of a tiny kingdom made of my paycheck. Sushi, smoothies, gourmet burgers. Once, I peeked at the receipts, $1.42 for a salad. She didn't even finish it. I asked her to use the groceries we already had. Her response? "I'm not in a headspace to cook. You can't put a price on emotional healing." Apparently, you could. It was $38.99 for pad thai. I watched the numbers in our bank account dip lower each week. My credit card started creeping toward its limit. The joint account I shared with Brielle became a bottomless pit. I was floating this house of 4 grown women, each with her own needs, routines, luxuries. And me? I wore the same pair of work shoes until the soles gave out. Skipped lunch to stretch groceries. Stopped going to the gym because I couldn't justify the membership anymore. I didn't say anything at first. Part of me still clung to hope that this was temporary, that Brielle would wake up and realize the weight I was carrying alone. But one night, I sat down and did the math. I pulled up all our expenses, utilities, groceries, gas, subscriptions, and random Amazon purchases. I compared them to what I was bringing in. The numbers didn't lie. We were hemorrhaging money. And I was quietly drowning, smiling while doing it, because no one else seemed to care. That night at dinner, I decided to finally speak up. We were all at the table, rare, considering everyone's erratic schedules. Simone had just come back from a chakra reading, Harper was scrolling through her phone looking at velvet boots, and Noelle was halfway through her second Poke Bowl of the day. Brielle sat next to me, sipping red wine like it was a regular Tuesday. "I need to talk to you all," I said, clearing my throat. Harper didn't look up. Simone adjusted her posture like she was preparing for a TED Talk. Noelle blinked at me, annoyed I'd interrupted her show. "We need to cut back," I said. "I've been covering everything, every single bill, every meal, every delivery, and it's getting unsustainable. I'm asking that each of you contribute something, even if it's just $100 a month. Groceries, utilities, anything." The silence that followed was thick. Brielle looked at me like I had just insulted her ancestors. "Are you seriously bringing this up like we're freeloaders?" I swallowed hard. "No, I'm saying I can't do this alone. I'm asking for help." Simone rolled her eyes. "Well, toxic masculinity strikes again." "What?" I blinked. You just can't handle strong women being comfortable in your space, she continued. We're not asking for the world. Just safety while we heal. Harper laughed dryly. Maybe you should get a second job instead of lecturing us about money. Noelle, without looking up from her phone, mumbled, money comes and goes, but love is forever. I stared at her. Excuse me. She waved me off. You're being negative. It's messing with the vibe. I looked at Brielle again, begging for her to defend me, to see what was happening. But she just shook her head slowly. You need to learn humility. You're not the only one sacrificing. That word again. Humility. The first time it sounded like a gentle lesson. Now it sounded like a threat. I stood up slowly. My appetite was gone. My sense of place, too. I'm not trying to fight, I said quietly. I'm trying to survive. Brielle stood too, gathering plates like the conversation never happened. Then maybe you need to reflect on why survival feels like a burden. Maybe you're the problem. I left the table without another word. The walls of my own house felt like strangers closing in. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell we got here. Wondering when love became an invoice I wasn't allowed to question. I thought they'd heard me. I thought maybe we were finally going to change. I didn't realize they had already made their decision. I sat at the dinner table with my palms flat against the wood, the faint thrum of frustration pulsing in my wrists. The women around me, the so-called queens of this castle, were laughing, drinking, and scrolling, untouched by the weight that had been pressing on my back for months. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say a dozen times in my head, kept adjusting the tone, trimming the words, hoping to find the version that wouldn't spark a fight. But it didn't matter. There was no version of the truth that would have landed softly with them. I need to talk, I said, voice calm but firm. All at once, the atmosphere changed. Simone glanced at me with a raised brow, slowly setting her fork down like I had interrupted something sacred. Harper kept sipping her wine, but her lips were already twitching with judgment. Noelle didn't bother to hide her annoyance. She simply sighed and paused her show. Brielle, my wife, looked at me with a caution I hadn't seen before, like she already knew what I was about to say and had chosen her side before I opened my mouth. I've been thinking about the finances, I began. And we need to make some changes. Noelle groaned immediately. Ugh, here we go. I ignored her and pushed forward. I'm the only one working, and it's not sustainable. The bills are stacking up. The credit cards are full. I can't keep covering everything. We need to cut back. And I need each of you to start contributing something, even a small amount. Brielle leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. You said you wanted to provide for this family, that you were built for this. That was before it became 5 grown adults living off one paycheck, I replied. It's not just you and me anymore. It's turned into a lifestyle where I carry all of it, and I'm telling you I'm slipping under. Simone scoffed, eyes wide like I just said something blasphemous. Slipping under? You have a job, a house, a car. What exactly is slipping, King? Debt, I answered plainly. Stress. Exhaustion. I work 6 days a week and I still come home to an empty fridge I restocked 3 days ago and bills that are never discussed. It's not fair. Harper laughed then. A short, cold sound. You sound like a martyr. Nobody forced you to be generous. You did that all on your own. I wasn't trying to be a martyr, I said through gritted teeth. I was trying to be a husband, a provider. But I didn't sign up to be taken advantage of. Noelle piped up, her tone syrupy and passive-aggressive. Money comes and goes, but love is forever. That's what you should focus on. That's easy to say when it's not your money going. I shot back, sharper than I intended. Her mouth dropped open in offense, but I kept going. If I keep this up, I'll lose everything. My credit's already taking hits. I'm not asking for miracles. I'm asking for respect, for shared responsibility, for help. Brielle's eyes burned into mine, her jaw tight. You sound like you're blaming us. I'm blaming the situation, I said, trying to rein it in. But if you're living in the house, eating the food, using the utilities, and contributing nothing, then yeah, maybe you should feel a little blamed. She stood. I can't believe how selfish you're being. My stomach dropped. Selfish? I'm drowning and you're calling me selfish. You're trying to make us feel like burdens, Simone snapped. That's emotional manipulation. It's math, I said. Not manipulation. You live here. You cost money. I don't want you gone. I want support. Maybe you need to learn humility, Brielle said. The words landed like a slap. Humility. Again. Like I was some prideful tyrant demanding too much when all I'd done was keep the lights on. That phrase, meant to teach, only deepened the pit in my chest. There was no way to reason with people who twisted your pleas into attacks. "I'm done talking," I said finally. "I've said what I needed to say." I pushed back from the table and walked away, the weight of 4 stairs burning into my back. I went into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. The silence in there felt safer than the noise outside. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too stunned, too disappointed. An hour later, Brielle came in. I looked up, hopeful for a second that she'd heard me. Really heard me. But her face was cold. Resigned. "We'll talk later," she said. "But you seriously need to check your tone next time." Then she turned and left. I slept restlessly. Dreamed of drowning in bills and voices that didn't care. Woke up feeling worse than when I fell asleep. But I still got up, put on my uniform, and went to work. Because that's what I did. That's what I'd always done. The next day, I brought home groceries again. I filled the tank. I paid the electricity. No one said thank you. No one asked how I was. The dinner table was warm again. But not for me. They laughed and gossiped as if the conversation from the night before had never happened. I was invisible. I was tired. But I still didn't expect what happened next. When I came home the following evening, I noticed something was off. My key stuck in the lock. I jiggled it, confused, until it slid in, but it wouldn't turn. I tried again, slower. Nothing. My stomach dropped. I looked down. 3 bags sat on the porch. My duffel. A box with my name scrawled across it in permanent marker, and a manila envelope taped to the door. I stepped closer, heart pounding, pulled the note free, and read the words written in Brielle's unmistakable script. "Reflect on your actions. Come back when you're ready to support this family without conditions." I didn't even try to knock. I just stood there for a while, stunned, my breath caught between disbelief and rage. Behind the walls I'd paid for, I could hear laughter. Plates clinking. My home, humming without me. I stared at the note again, then at the house, then down at my things. And all I could do was sit on the steps, head in my hands, wondering how love became this ugly, how care turned into exile. I dared to speak, and they called it betrayal. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, the sun was low enough to smear golden streaks across the roof I paid for. I remember reaching into the passenger seat for the takeout bag I'd picked up. Brielle's favorite pad thai, extra spicy, no peanuts. Even after the tension from the night before, I thought maybe food could soften the sharp edges. Maybe we'd talk again. Maybe I'd finally be heard. I was exhausted, but a part of me still held onto the idea that reason could pull us back to center. But when I stepped up to the front door and slid my key into the lock, it jammed. I blinked, pulled it out, tried again, slower this time. It wouldn't turn. I frowned, thinking maybe something was stuck. I bent lower, squinting at the lock, and that's when I noticed the thin layer of new polish on the metal. My heart began to pick up pace. I tried again, both hands now, jiggling and twisting like I could force it open with persistence. But nothing gave. The door had been rekeyed. I stepped back and my eyes dropped to the porch. That's when I saw them. 3 duffel bags, mine. My laptop bag. A plastic bin with my name taped across it in thick, black marker. On top of it all, folded neatly, was the hoodie I wore on our first date. And right in the center of the door, taped above the mail slot, was an envelope. No stamp, just my name written across the front. I tore it down with numb fingers. Opened it. Read. Reflect on your actions. Come back when you're ready to support this family without conditions. No signature. No love, Brielle. Just that flat, dismissive line. I stood there, stunned, for what felt like 10 full minutes. The takeout bag was still in my hand. I could hear faint music from inside, someone laughing, probably Simone, maybe Noelle. The kitchen window was lit, blinds turned just enough to keep the inside hidden from view. The home I paid for, worked for, bled and bent myself for, sealed off from me like I'd never been there. I didn't knock. I didn't shout. I just set the food down beside the bags and sat on the porch steps, trying to process how calmly and completely I'd been erased. It wasn't just betrayal. It was betrayal served with a side of condescension. They hadn't even had the decency to confront me face to face. No shouting match. No dramatic argument. Just silence, followed by a quiet coup. I pulled out my phone and texted Brielle. Me. Are you serious? No response. Me. You really locked me out of my own house. Read. No reply. I called. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I felt cold all over. Humiliation crawled up my spine, heavy and hot like acid. What had I done? Spoken up? Asked for fairness? That was the crime? That was enough to make me the outsider in my own life? Eventually, I loaded the bags into my trunk and sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the house through the windshield. The porch light flicked on like clockwork. Automatic. Unfeeling. I drove without a destination. I passed the gas station where Brielle used to grab snacks before movie nights. The bakery she made me drive across town for on her birthday. Every corner of this town held a ghost of us, and each one whispered a new kind of hurt. I ended up in a strip mall parking lot around 10:45 p.m. The engine was off, the air was still warm, and the radio buzzed with soft static. I reclined the seat and stared at the ceiling of my car. That night, I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too numb. But the next night, I broke. I'd spent the day parked outside a 24-hour gym, using their restroom to clean up, brushing my teeth at a sink that smelled like bleach and sweat. I scrolled through old pictures while eating a sandwich from a vending machine. In every photo, I saw myself smiling, unaware of what was coming. At 2 a.m., I sobbed into my steering wheel. No holding back. Just this primal, ugly kind of grief that poured out of me like I was purging poison. I screamed into the silence of my car. Slammed my fists against the dashboard. Let the weight of everything collapse on me at once. I was supposed to be the man of the house. Protector. Provider. Husband. Instead, I was a man with nowhere to go and no one to call. The third night, I was angry. Every moment replayed in my head like a highlight reel of my own stupidity. Every gift I'd bought. Every bill I'd covered. Every time I let their comments slide. Every passive-aggressive jab I'd swallowed instead of pushing back. I imagined storming into that house and demanding answers. But the anger wasn't productive, it only burned me. By the fourth night, something broke. And it wasn't despair. It was something else, something quieter. Acceptance. The truth hit me with sudden clarity. They didn't want a partner. They wanted a servant with a paycheck. I'd been trying to fix something that didn't want to be fixed. I'd been begging for fairness from people who believed entitlement was a right. I wasn't kicked out because I was cruel. I was kicked out because I refused to keep playing their game. That night, I picked up my phone and called Jonah. We hadn't talked much in the last year. Life, work, marriage. But he was the kind of friend you don't have to reintroduce yourself to. Hey, I said when he picked up. He could hear it in my voice. What happened? I told him everything. Every detail. Every cut. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, let me vent until the words ran dry. After a pause, he said, "You realize they just freed you, right?" I blinked. What? They didn't lock you out, man. They unlocked you. You were stuck. Now you're not. That's a gift. I didn't know how to respond. Not right away. But something about what he said settled deep in me. I'd been begging for a seat at a table where I'd already paid the bill and still wasn't served. Now, I was out. Free. I didn't have a plan yet. But I had something I hadn't felt in months. A spark. And sometimes, a spark is all it takes to burn the whole facade down. The first night I slept in my car, I told myself it was just temporary. Just until Brielle came to her senses. Just until someone in that house, someone I once fed, laughed with, loved, realized how insane it was to lock a man out of the very home he paid for. I parked near a park, one I used to jog through before all this. I tilted my seat back, pulled an old hoodie over my chest, and tried to rest. But sleep didn't come easy when the back seat held my clothes and my heart was a knotted wreck of confusion and rage. I woke up to condensation on the windows and a cramp in my neck that felt like it had been poured in concrete. I stretched slowly, gingerly, like a man twice my age. My phone had 3% battery left, and I used it to scroll through our old messages. Brielle's good mornings, selfies from her desk, flirty one-liners she used to send when I'd stay late at work. None of it felt real anymore. Those words belonged to another version of her. A version that vanished somewhere between her sister's moving in and my dignity being tossed out onto the porch. The second night was harder. It rained. Cold, messy rain that pattered on the windshield like a ticking reminder of how far I'd fallen. I cried that night. Not loud, not uncontrollably, but steady. Quiet tears that slipped down without permission. I missed my bed. I missed hot showers. I missed the illusion that I was loved, that what I gave meant something. That home was a word that still applied to me. By the third night, the sadness had dried up and something meaner settled in its place. Anger, not the kind that explodes, the kind that sits in your chest like a stone and poisons every breath. I replayed every moment. The nights I paid for takeout while Noelle complained that the sushi wasn't authentic enough. The mornings I cleaned up after Simone's spa day chaos in the bathroom. The Saturdays Harper borrowed the car to go job hunting, but came back with new heels. And Brielle, God, Brielle, how she changed. How she let them warp her into someone who could look me in the eye and say you need to learn humility, as if I hadn't already bent myself into dust for her. But the fourth night, something shifted. I was parked in front of an old gym near the edge of the city. It was quiet, dimly lit, and blessedly empty. I sat behind the wheel with the windows cracked just enough to let the air in and thought about my life. My life, not the version I was funding for them. Not the man they reduced to a wallet with a pulse. But the boy I used to be. The man I fought to become. The values I held before I was buried in their expectations. That's when I called Jonah. He answered on the second ring, groggy. Yo, it's late. I know, I said. My voice was dry, almost hoarse. I need a favor. What's going on? He asked, already more alert. I didn't try to sugarcoat it. I told him everything. The lockout, the bags on the porch, the note, the silence. I told him about the cold nights, the mounting anger, the way Brielle's words still rang in my head like a verdict I never agreed to. He didn't interrupt. He just let me bleed it out. When I finally stopped talking, he was quiet for a moment, then said something that hit me like a sucker punch. You realize they just freed you, right? I blinked. What? They didn't kick you out, man. They released you. You were holding up a damn house on your back while they stood around decorating it. That note on the door? That was your emancipation letter. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Somewhere deep down, I knew he was right. I hadn't been living. I'd been surviving. Working to feed a system that only drained me more. I was doing everything for people who wouldn't even meet me halfway. Maybe being shut out wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was the clearest answer I was ever going to get. Jonah didn't hesitate. Come crash here. I've got a pull-out and clean towels. I drove to his place that night, 30 minutes through near-empty streets. When I walked into his apartment, small, a little messy, but warm, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not comfort, not joy, but peace. It was a start. We sat on the couch for hours. I talked, he listened. Then he talked, and I realized how much I'd missed real conversation. No hidden barbs. No judgment wrapped in self-righteous phrases. Just honesty, clarity, humanity. He poured me a drink and said, So what's your move now? I didn't answer right away. I just looked around, really looked around. At the space that didn't demand anything from me. At the silence that didn't scream my failures back at me. I think I finally see what I couldn't before, I said. They didn't love me. Not the way I needed to be loved. They loved what I did. What I gave. The silence I kept. The way I never made them uncomfortable with the truth. Jonah nodded slowly. So what are you going to do with that? I pulled my phone out and opened my banking app. Transferred my salary into a new, private account. Called the bank to freeze the joint one. It was still in my name, after all. Every deposit. Every withdrawal. My money had been running a one-sided charity for long enough. I was done playing benefactor to people who only saw me as useful until I stopped being agreeable. I pulled up the mortgage info. Sole borrower, me. I'd paid for the down payment. I signed every dotted line. Brielle's name was never added to the deed. Not because I didn't trust her, but because she said, It doesn't matter. What's mine is yours. That phrase stung now like a punchline to a cruel joke. Next, I told Jonah, I call my lawyer. Because they didn't just lock me out. They declared war on the wrong man. I wasn't homeless. I wasn't lost. I was awake. And they had no idea what kind of storm they just handed the keys to. The next morning, I woke up on Jonah's pull-out couch to the sound of city traffic humming below the apartment. The sun filtered through the blinds, slicing shadows across the ceiling like quiet reminders that time hadn't stopped, even if my world had. My body ached, not from the couch but from everything else, the betrayal, the weight of silence, the constant grind of trying to survive in a house that had never truly been mine. But something had changed overnight. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt resolved. I sat up slowly, ran a hand over my face, and glanced at my phone. Still no text from Brielle. No missed calls. Just silence. Not even a follow-up to the reflect on your actions note. For a moment, I wondered if she thought I'd be begging by now, waiting outside with my tail tucked, desperate to be allowed back into a life that drained me. But I wasn't that man anymore. By 9 a.m., I was showered, dressed, and ready. Not for work, but for something far more important. I opened my laptop and logged into the joint bank account first. Every time I had done this over the past year, it was to assess how far we'd sunk, how fast the money was being spent. But this time, I had a plan. The first step, freeze the account. It was mine. Every paycheck that landed there, every automatic payment that left. Brielle had access, but not ownership. I changed the password, removed her from auto access, and scheduled a final transfer into a new private account I'd opened the night before. It felt like closing a bleeding wound. For the first time in years, my money had nowhere to go but back to me. The second step, contact the mortgage company. I'd been nervous about that at first, worried they might ask for a joint authorization or that some clause in the paperwork would surprise me. But as I pulled up the original documents, I realized something Brielle had clearly forgotten. I was the sole borrower. Her name wasn't on anything. Not the deed, not the loan, not even the insurance policy. I dialed the number and waited. After 3 short beeps, a customer service rep picked up, cheerful and oblivious to the storm churning on my end of the line. "Hi, I'd like to update my account details," I said. "Certainly, sir. How can I help you today?" "I need to change the mailing address on file," I said, giving them Jonah's apartment for now. "And I want to make sure all communication goes through me only. No additional household contacts authorized." "Understood. Would you like to remove any previous contacts listed?" "There shouldn't be any. Just make sure I'm the only point of contact going forward." She paused, then confirmed. "Yes, Mr. Hayes, you are indeed the sole borrower. We'll update your preferences now." I hung up, exhaled, and stared at the screen. That house, the one they had turned into a hotel, a spa, a shopping mall, was legally and financially mine. Not theirs. They were, in the legal sense of things, squatters with a free ride. And now the ride was over. I called my lawyer next. I'd met Mr. Dalka 3 years ago when I first bought the house. He was calm, meticulous, and not one for unnecessary conversation, which was exactly what I needed. "Mr. Hayes," he greeted. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need to discuss an unlawful occupation situation," I said. "It involves my residence and 4 individuals currently residing in it without any legal standing." I could almost hear him raise an eyebrow. "Go on." I explained the situation in full, how I had been locked out, how none of the women had legal ties to the property, how I had continued to cover all financial responsibilities until this week. He didn't interrupt, just listened, took notes, and finally said, "You have options. Multiple ones, in fact. We can start with a formal notice of unlawful occupancy. From there, we move to an ejection notice. With proof of financial contribution and sole ownership, it's very straightforward. Can I take back my possessions? If you can prove ownership and they're movable goods, yes. But document everything. Photos, receipts, appraisals if needed." Done. I scheduled a formal notice delivery for the following week. I'd give them a few days, not out of kindness, but as a courtesy to the process. Let them sit in that house and think the silence meant victory. Let them post selfies, throw brunches, light incense, and talk about vibrations while they soaked in water I paid to heat. While they played queens, I was reclaiming my kingdom. The rest of the day, I gathered every receipt I could find: furniture, electronics, kitchen appliances, the washer and dryer. Even the damn throw pillow Simone claimed added texture. All of it had my name on it. My card. My labor. I rented a storage unit on the west side and booked 2 professional movers. I'd be going in soon, quietly, legally, and with every ounce of calm I had left. There would be no screaming. No revenge speech. Just consequences. That evening, Jonah handed me a cold beer as we sat on his balcony. "You look different," he said. "I feel different." "Like what?" "Like I finally stopped begging to be loved by people who only respected me when I was silent." He nodded. "That's heavy. It's also freeing." I looked out at the skyline, the buildings stacked like memory boxes, each one full of its own stories. Somewhere in the middle of that concrete jungle was a house I had once dreamed of growing old in. No, it was just a structure. Walls and wires. The soul had been gone long before they pushed me out. I just didn't want to admit it. I didn't check my phone for Brielle's messages anymore. The quiet suited me, because I wasn't waiting anymore. I was moving, and they wouldn't see it coming. The morning of the move started quiet. There was no dramatic music, no internal monologue filled with righteous fury. Just sunlight leaking through the blinds in Jonah's spare room and the soft buzz of my phone alarm. I turned it off without hesitation. Today wasn't about emotion. It was about clarity, execution, and reclaiming what was mine. I dressed in a plain black tee and jeans, nothing flashy, just durable enough for lifting. I met the movers outside their truck at 10 a.m. sharp. You know what's yours? One of them asked, clipboard in hand, chewing on a pen cap. I nodded, flipping through a printed list I'd organized by room. Everything on this sheet was paid for by me and is listed in the affidavit. I'll direct you as we go. We've got 2 hours, maybe less. They won't be home until noon. They didn't question it. They weren't hired to understand the situation. They were here to move furniture, to roll up the rugs I purchased with a Christmas bonus Brielle never thanked me for. To unscrew the TV I mounted after a long day's work while Simone recorded a video titled, How to Protect Your Aura from Low Vibrations. We pulled up to the house around 10:15. From the outside, it looked the same. The front steps where I used to leave notes on anniversaries. The flower beds I once planted with Brielle during spring. All of it now looked like set dressing for a life that no longer fit me. I unlocked the door, not with a key, but with the officer who accompanied me. My lawyer had already filed the necessary notice, which had been served 2 days prior. They were legally informed. And still, they underestimated me. The door opened with a familiar creak. The house smelled like lavender and entitlement. Candles flickered on the kitchen counter. A partially eaten acai bowl sat on the coffee table beside a MacBook I'd purchased last year for Noel's business launch, which never launched. I took a breath and stepped inside. The movers followed my lead. I pointed to the sectional couch, navy blue, firm, mid-century style. My pick. That's coming. Then the dining table. Mine. Chairs too. The bar cart. The floor lamp. The mirror above the fireplace. The king-sized bed with the imported frame. Mine. It felt mechanical at first, just business. But as I moved from room to room, it started to sink in. Every item had a memory, a story, a receipt in my name, and not a single one came with gratitude. I walked past Simone's crystals and meditation cushions, past Harper's overflowing clothing rack in the den, past Noelle's vanity setup, which still had my card saved on her Sephora account. They turned every inch of this house into their personal playground, a boutique of borrowed luxury. But none of them had lifted a finger to pay for it. One of the movers signaled from upstairs. We got a question on the closet. This dresser yours? I climbed up and peeked in. It was Brielle's side of the closet. But the dresser? Bought with my bonus check the year we got married. I remembered it clearly because she cried when I surprised her with it, claiming no one had ever seen her needs like I did. It's mine, I said, voice steady. Take it. Back downstairs, the officer remained near the door, arms folded, unbothered. My lawyer wasn't far behind, organizing photos, confirming item ownership. Everything was lined up, tight, clean, indisputable. At 11:45, the trucks were almost full. I stood in the kitchen, looking around the skeleton of what used to be a shared space. The house wasn't empty yet, but it felt hollow. With every box removed, with every item claimed, the illusion they built collapsed further. Then I heard the sound of heels on pavement. The front door flew open. Brielle stepped in first, flanked by Simone and Harper. Noelle trailed behind with her phone in hand, already recording. The brunch must have ended early. What the hell is this? Brielle snapped, eyes wide as she took in the scene. I didn't flinch. I turned to her calmly. I'm collecting what I paid for. You can't just take our stuff. Simone shrieked, stepping forward. It's not your stuff, I said. It's mine. Check the receipts. Everything has documentation. Harper pulled out her phone. We're calling the cops. You're welcome to, I said, gesturing to the uniformed officer beside me. Or you can talk to my lawyer. Brielle's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted between the officer and the moving trucks. You're being unreasonable. We were giving you space. You didn't have to do this. I raised an eyebrow. You gave me space? You locked me out of my own home and left a note like I was an intern who needed coaching. You didn't ask. You decided. This is me doing the same. Noelle wept dramatically, as if on cue. You're just abandoning us? I chuckled under my breath, not with humor, but disbelief. Abandoning? You kicked me out. I asked for help. You threw me away. You wanted to teach me humility. Congratulations. Lesson learned. Simone crossed her arms. So this is revenge? No, I said, stepping closer. This is recovery. There's a difference. Brielle's face crumbled slightly, her voice dropping. We can talk about this. We can fix it. I shook my head slowly. You don't get to make offers now. You made your choice when you sided with comfort over partnership. When you let entitlement speak louder than love. The movers carried out the last few items. I turned to the officer and nodded. We're done. As I stepped outside, I looked back once, just once. The women stood in the living room, framed by the doorway like a painting of disbelief and regret. But I didn't linger. I didn't soften. Some goodbyes don't need words. Some closures don't need slamming doors. They just need clarity. And I had more than enough of that now. It should have ended with the move. It should have ended with the sight of my belongings rolling away in 2 trucks while the women who once controlled the narrative stood in stunned silence. But with people like them, people who confuse comfort with entitlement, who treat generosity like a given, it never ends quietly. They didn't expect me to act. They didn't expect a single word I said to be followed by strategy. For years, I played the quiet provider, the yes man, the one who solved problems without causing any. But this version of me, the one who learned to breathe without begging for air, they didn't see him coming. And now, I was standing in my power, and they were scrambling. It started the next morning. I was having coffee at Jonah's kitchen table when I got the first text from Brielle. Brielle, can we talk? In person. Just you and me. I didn't respond. I let the message sit there, unread but definitely received. Less than an hour later came another, this time more urgent. Brielle, I think we're both reacting from a place of pain. We need to talk this out like adults. This isn't what I wanted. She still didn't get it. She thought this was a fight we could return from, as if locking your husband out of his own house was just a heat-of-the-moment decision. As if teaching someone humility through exile was a marital rough patch. But I wasn't reacting. I was responding. With boundaries, with clarity, and with a level of calm that unnerved them far more than shouting ever would. The next message didn't come from her. Simone, wow, you're really on your villain arc, huh? Hope the couch you're crashing on is comfy. That one made me laugh. Because Simone never knew how to take responsibility for anything. She thought biting sarcasm would somehow shame me back into silence. But I'd shed that skin. I was done being ashamed for wanting balance. Done being guilt-tripped for asking grown adults to contribute to a household they drained. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the house one last time, with the officer again, this time to finalize the lock change and file the notice of possession. It was just paperwork, but the timing was perfect. They were all home. The officer rang the doorbell while I waited on the walkway. I saw the curtains move before the door creaked open. Harper answered, sunglasses on, dressed like she was late for a lunch she hadn't been invited to. She froze when she saw me standing behind the officer. You're back? She said, mouth tight. No, I said. Just finishing what I started. She stepped aside reluctantly as we walked in. The place looked half-heartedly rearranged, like they tried to reclaim it by moving pillows and lighting new candles. But there was no covering up the hollowness. My absence was visible in every corner. Missing furniture, empty walls, rooms that had lost their center. Brielle was in the kitchen. She turned as I entered, her face carefully composed but her eyes darting, unsure. I didn't think you'd come back, she said softly. I didn't, I replied. I came to finish things. The officer handed her the updated documents, proof of lock change, notice of unauthorized occupancy, the updated deed with my exclusive control over the property. She skimmed through it, and her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. You're really doing this? Yes, I said. I'm really done. She stepped forward, arms crossed, eyes searching mine. We were hurting. We made a mistake. You're just going to throw it all away. I tilted my head. Brielle, you threw me out. You changed the locks. You put a note on the door like I was a delivery. What did you think was going to happen? That I'd wait outside until you felt I'd learned my lesson? Her voice wavered. I was scared. They were scared. We thought you were going to abandon us. You pushed me out because I asked for help, I said. That's not fear. That's entitlement with lipstick. Noelle walked in then, arms folded tightly, voice trembling. "You're tearing this family apart." I turned to her, keeping my tone even. This family fell apart the moment love became conditional on silence. The moment respect was replaced with expectations I was never allowed to question. Simone entered behind her, rolling her eyes. "So what? You're the victim now? You want applause for being basic? For paying bills? That's literally what men do." I laughed, not bitterly, but genuinely. "You're right. I paid bills, and gave rides, and ran errands, and fixed things, and covered groceries, and took care of everyone. And when I finally said it was too much, you all decided I was less of a man. You didn't want a husband. You wanted an investor with no equity." The room fell quiet. Even Simone looked stunned for a second. Harper, who had been standing silently with her arms folded, finally spoke. "You could have talked to us before doing all this legal stuff." "I did," I said. "Multiple times. I sat at this very table and told you I needed help. You called it complaining. You told me to learn humility. Well, I did. And I learned something else too. Silence isn't strength. It's surrender. And I'm done surrendering." Brielle stepped forward again, softer this time. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, looking around one final time. "Now I leave. You figure out your next move. You've got 5 days to vacate or respond legally. After that, it's court. But I won't be chasing you. I won't be rescuing you. I won't be carrying what isn't mine." She blinked rapidly. "You really won't give us another chance?" "No," I said simply. "Because I gave you too many already." I turned to the officer. "We're done here." As we walked out, Brielle called after me. "This isn't the man I married." I paused at the door, turned slightly. "You're right," I said. "That man would have let you keep taking. This one learned to stop bleeding for people who call it weakness when he asks for a bandage." And with that, I stepped outside. The air was crisp, light, unburdened. Behind me, the house stood like a shell, echoing with a truth they'd spent too long avoiding. The man who held it together had finally let go. And nothing scared them more than the silence he left behind. The first thing I noticed in the new condo was the silence, but not the kind that pressed down like guilt or hovered like judgment. This silence was clean, pure. It didn't demand anything from me. No voices asking me to pick up oat milk or cover a group brunch bill. No faint tapping of acrylic nails on countertops. No arguments over incense smoke choking the hallway. It was just mine. For walls, modestly furnished, a view of the city that didn't scream wealth or power, just peace. And for the first time in over a year, I could breathe. I hadn't decorated much. A couch, a bed, a table. No clutter. No piles of shopping bags stacked against the walls. Everything in the condo had a purpose. Like me, I spent the first few weeks doing what most people take for granted. Cooking meals I actually liked. Sitting down to eat without background noise or tension. Going to bed knowing the water bill wouldn't be used for hour-long healing baths, and that the lights I turned off at night would still be respected in the morning. I opened my bank app and didn't feel dread. My credit was recovering. My savings was slowly rebuilding. And my time, my precious, irreplaceable time, was mine again. Jonah came by one evening with takeout. He walked in, looked around, and said, "This place feels like you." I nodded. It wasn't much yet, but it didn't have to be. It was a beginning, a soft reset, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly but speaks through the way you no longer flinch when your phone rings. We sat on the balcony, legs kicked up, watching the sun crawl behind buildings we didn't know the names of. He handed me a beer and said, "So, how's the quiet treating you?" I took a sip and smiled, like a good therapist. Uncomfortable at first, but it's teaching me things. He laughed. "You're a whole monk now." I shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just learning how to exist without constantly apologizing for needing respect." There were no new texts from Brielle. No angry paragraphs. No late-night apologies. She'd sent one long message 2 weeks after the final confrontation. It started with her usual soft opening. "I've been thinking a lot." Then came the apologies. The memories. The late-night laughs. The dreams we once had of starting a family. She said the house felt empty now. That her sisters were scattered. That things weren't the same. Simone had moved in with a friend. Harper was staying with a cousin across town. Noelle, apparently, was bouncing between couches. Brielle had gone back to her parents' place, something she once swore she'd never do. She ended her message with, "I see things differently now. I'd like to talk. Maybe rebuild." If there's any part of you that still remembers what we had, please don't let it end like this. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some closures don't come with fireworks or shouting. Sometimes they arrive in silence, a choice not to return a message, a moment when you don't look back even when you're tempted. Besides, I wasn't alone anymore. Jonah had introduced me to someone, Talia. We met over coffee. Not a date, just conversation. She was soft-spoken, confident, carried a kind of quiet strength that didn't need to prove itself. We talked about everything except pain. Not because we were avoiding it, but because there was more to us than what we had survived. She asked questions. She listened without planning her reply. She didn't flinch when I mentioned divorce. She simply nodded and said, "That must have been hard." It was the first time I felt seen, not studied. We didn't rush anything. I wasn't in a hurry to replace what I'd lost. In fact, I didn't see Talia as a replacement for anything. She was her own moment. And I didn't compare her to Brielle because the comparison didn't make sense. Brielle had been chaos wrapped in charm. Talia was presence, simple, rooted, whole. She came over once, saw my near-empty condo, and said, "It's peaceful here." I smiled. That's the goal. And when she left that night, she didn't ask when she'd see me next. She trusted I'd reach out. She didn't cling. She didn't perform. She didn't need saving. The more I spoke with her, the more I realized how much of my marriage had been about performance. Me being the provider, the strong one, the fixer. And how often I let love become a transaction. A job. A role I couldn't clock out of. Now, I had freedom. And I was using it to build something slower, quieter, stronger. Word got around, of course. Mutual friends began to drop little updates about Brielle and her sisters. I never asked, but the stories found me. Power had been shut off in the house a week after the final legal notice. None of them knew how to reset the circuit breaker. The landlord next door said they were using candles and flashlights for a while until Brielle moved back with her parents. Harper tried to rent a studio but couldn't get approved. No income. Bad credit. Simone had a falling out with her friend and was now couch surfing. Noelle, someone said, started an OnlyFans to empower herself financially. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I felt detached. Not in a bitter way. Just distant. Like watching characters from a book I'd already finished. One friend told me Brielle was going to therapy now. That she was working on her self-sabotage patterns. That she wanted to reach out again. But I'd made peace with the version of myself that used to crave her approval. That man was tired. He'd given his all to people who didn't value effort unless it came with a zero balance and no conditions. I was no longer looking for applause. I was looking for peace. And in my condo, bare walls and all, I had it. I started therapy too. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to make sure I never went back to the kind of silence that let people mistake me for a doormat. I wanted to protect the man I was becoming. The man who set boundaries without flinching. The man who didn't equate self-worth with being needed. There's a kind of clarity that comes when the noise dies. When the opinions fade. When the house you paid for becomes someone else's problem and you stop needing to be the solution to everyone else's chaos. That clarity? It's what love should have felt like. And I wasn't going to settle for anything less again. The message came late on a Sunday night, around 11:37 p.m. The glow of my phone lit up the nightstand beside my bed. I wasn't asleep. I'd been sitting in the quiet, sipping tea, thinking about how calm life had become. Talia had left an hour earlier, her laughter still echoing in the hallway as she waved goodbye. Her goodbye didn't sting. It didn't leave questions. It felt like breath, not burden. But this message wasn't from her. Brielle, I've been thinking about everything. About you. About us. I know I hurt you. I know we did. I just didn't realize it in time. I see it now. I see how much you carried and how little I appreciated it. I was wrong. We all were. There was a pause before the second bubble popped up. Brielle, if you still have space for me in your heart, if there's any chance at all, can we talk? I miss you. I miss us. Please don't let this be the end. I stared at the message, not angry, not surprised, just still. It had been months since I last saw her face, and in that time, I had peeled off layers of myself I didn't even know had hardened over. That house, that life, those arguments. I had survived them, yes, but I had also outgrown them. It's strange, the power of silence. When you first step into it, it feels like a punishment, a void. But over time, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes sanctuary. And I had built one for myself in every small choice since the day I walked out of that house. I found peace in slow mornings, in choosing what I ate, in not checking my bank account with a clenched jaw. I found strength in the mundane. Grocery shopping alone, fixing my own sink, folding laundry at midnight without anyone sighing that I wasn't doing it right. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Brielle's message, sincere as it may have been, wasn't a key back in. It was a mirror. One last reflection of the man I used to be. The one who tolerated being spoken over, ignored, used, and called selfish for speaking up. She missed the version of me who put her comfort above my own clarity. That man was gone. And I didn't mourn him. I honored him by letting him rest. I didn't respond to her message. I didn't need to. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation or apology. Sometimes, it's just a quiet decision not to go backward. I remember that day I stood on the porch, reading her handwritten note telling me to reflect on my actions. At the time, it stung. It humiliated me. But now I could see the irony. She meant it as a punishment, but it turned out to be the greatest gift I'd ever received. Because when I reflected, really reflected, I didn't see a man who failed his family. I saw a man who'd been failed by people who believed love meant unconditional servitude. And when I finally walked away, I didn't just leave the house. I left the version of me that thought love meant tolerating disrespect. I left the expectation that my value was tied to my wallet. I left the silence. Talia never asked me to fix anything for her. She never made me feel like I owed her peace. She brought her own. When she laughed, it wasn't to cover tension. When she spoke, it wasn't to dominate or control. Being around her didn't feel like auditioning. It felt like arriving. One night, as we walked downtown after dinner, she looked up at me and said, "You carry yourself like someone who's been burned but learned how to use the fire." I didn't respond right away. I just smiled and let her words sit. She saw me, not the version someone needed me to be, but the one I chose to become. I don't know where things will go with her. I don't need to know. What I do know is this: I chose myself. Not in spite, not in bitterness, but in clarity. I stopped asking to be included in tables I paid for. I stopped performing. I stopped sacrificing for people who saw my effort as expected rather than extraordinary. The man who was once the only one working, the only one giving, the only one left out of conversations in his own home, that man built a new life brick by quiet brick. And the foundation this time? It was respect. I still have that note Brielle left on the door, folded in a drawer. I keep it not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder. That moment didn't break me. It introduced me to myself. And I liked what I saw.